Hello and welcome back everyone to In My Shadow, the Atsumu Angst series. This is part 3, I hope you will like it. Enjoy! Rin? He guided Atsumu over to the couch while continuing to cough Asuna. His expression was determined, but Atsumu could see the shock he'd caused him showing up like this. This was exactly what he tried to avoid. Everyone worried about him. He caused them pain simply because his imagination was getting the better of him. He had no real proof that someone was following him. He could have misplaced his things, and maybe he forgot that he opened the window. Maybe... but that won't mean... Had he really lost his mind? What was wrong with him, and why so suddenly? In the span of a week, his health had deteriorated, and the paranoia had his heart jump in almost every second of the day. It had been only a week, but he was already an utter wreck. Then... I'm sorry. His voice was thin, and he weakly pulled his knees to his chest. He had no energy anymore to pretend. He felt empty and drained, and yet the tension didn't ease. At this point, it never did anymore. Shut your trap. You're obviously not thinking clearly if you think you have to apologize for this. Then, Samu, we talked about this. Don't wake me up early on off days. I don't care if you have to, I don't wanna. A very grumpy Suna walked into the room, eyes half closed and looking as though he'd lie down any moment on the spot and fall asleep again. Osamu sighed, though even in this state, there was no real heat behind it. It's an emergency. And what? He blinked confused at the silver hair before his gaze finally found the blonde twin and took in his state. I just need an hour, then Sato-san will arrive and can take over for me in the shop. Please, look out for him until then. He nodded slowly, perplexed. Seeing Atsumu so utterly broken was the last thing he expected to be confronted with this morning. He was still in shock when Osamu had thanked him with a quick kiss on the cheek and turned around to leave. And then it was quiet. It was so odd. He wasn't awake enough for this. It took his mind multiple long minutes to take in and process what was happening. Meanwhile, Atsumu simply tried to make himself as small as possible and tried to forget everything about this. He tried to forget the ever-looming presence of a thread dangling above his head like a guillotine, which he wasn't sure was reality or imagination. He tried to ignore any incoming consequences for being awful to his partners and suddenly disappearing without a trace, though maybe they'd welcome that after everything that happened recently. And most of all, he tried to forget the horrors his mind came up with for everything, most presently the events from last night paired with the open window this morning. He was trapped between searching his environment frantically for the threat when his eyes were open and begging silently not to be killed and for it all to be over when they were closed. Atsumu. He couldn't respond. He was paralyzed in the fetal position like a child scared of the dark with no parent to run to or too paralyzed in place by their fear. Hey, Atsumu. You're safe here. Rest. He glanced up at the middle blocker, his eyes red-rimmed and still glossy. He was shaking so much that he barely even noticed. In his desperation, he wanted to believe him so badly. And for a moment, he did. He held his breath and listened for the telltale footsteps or the tapping on the window, but nothing. No shadowy figure either, and for the first time in days, he didn't feel so observed. That, paired with the barely cured exhaustion from the bit of restless sleep he has gotten, led his eyes to fall shut once more. He barely noticed how Suna gently helped him lay down and untangled his tense muscles. A weight was placed above him, and by the time his head hit the pillow, he was already sinking into blissful darkness. As soon as Sato-san could take over with the promise he'd be downstairs immediately should the restaurant get too busy for some reason, Osamu rushed upstairs again. He expected to have to interrogate his brother to figure out what was wrong with him when he found him asleep on the couch. He still looked terrible. It was the first time in his life that he had seen him so sickly and frail. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Suna sat next to him on the floor. He had placed a blanket above the blonde and gently patted over his head. He looked worried, and Osamu understood immediately why. Upon noticing his arrival, Suna motioned for him to be quiet by placing a finger on his lips and got up. He led them to the kitchen to talk, and upon arriving there, sighed and leaned against the counter. It was silent for a moment. None of them knew where to start, because none of them ultimately knew anything besides what they could see right in front of them. What do you think happened? His gaze was still fixated on the living room as he asked. Osamu could see his shoulders tense and eyes fill with a mix of worry and anger. I don't know, but I don't like it at all that he's here with us and not with his boyfriends. That made Suna look up surprised before realization dawned on his face. You don't think they have anything to do with this, do you? He looked down, his fists clenching. Osamu, this is Kira, Aaron, and Sakusa we're talking about. They would never hurt him. I know, but look at him. What am I supposed to think? I don't know, but not that. Let's look at the possibilities. They could have fought, and maybe Atsumu scared they'll leave him. He tends to panic over such things. Yeah, but he would have said something already if that was the case. He looks like he hasn't slept in days, not as though he just left after a fight. Suna nodded slowly. Perhaps he isn't feeling well. Well, that much is obvious. Suna rolled his eyes. Osamu was always so on edge when it was about Atsumu, which was understandable, but the fact that he started to snap back wasn't exactly helpful. The silver heart noticed too, and for a moment his expression grew softer again and apologetic. Sorry. I'm just saying, he ignored being sick before, so maybe he tried the same now and it's getting to him. Then he looked terrified. Maybe it's bad. The words were quiet, mere whispers passed under his breath, but they felt like icy poison as Osamu realized what he meant. Immediately his eyes wandered over to Atsumu again, sickly pale and breathing irregularly in his sleep. No, it couldn't be. Atsumu wouldn't hide this from him. Not if it was truly that. Suna recognized the horror and panic slowly taking over in Osamu's expression, and was quick to place himself between him and his brother, and cupped his cheeks while letting his thumb roam soothingly above them. Hey, it's just a theory. and an unlikely one at that. We know way too little to make actual assumptions. Osamu nodded slowly, closing his eyes and leaning into his touch as if in pain and searching for comfort. It broke Suna's heart, and he lovingly caressed the soft skin on his face to massage the tension away. It's going to be alright. We'll make sure he's fine. He nodded again, and when his eyes opened, determination settled within. It was true that Atsumu had a tendency to hide things he was struggling with, but if it made him this sick, he couldn't keep it to himself any longer. Osamu would see to that. They kept themselves busy while Atsumu slept, yet always staying close enough to notice immediately when something changed. Osamu had Sato-san bring a fresh patch of Atsumu's favorite onigiri upstairs and stored it in the fridge for Atsumu to eat once he woke up. Hours passed like this. The younger twin was torn between his ever-growing need for answers and the relief that Atsumu finally got the rest he so desperately seemed to need. It was around 1 p.m. that something happened, but it wasn't Atsumu or Suna causing the commotion. Osamu was startled when the door to their apartment suddenly swung open, but his alarm settled when Komori appeared before him, out of breath and looking rather rushed. Toya, what? Have you seen your... He interrupted himself when his gaze fell on Atsumu. For a moment, he still looked flabbergasted before a huge sigh of relief escaped his lungs. Thank goodness! Kyo is losing his mind. He was so close to organizing a search party and calling the police. He quickly typed something on his phone before looking at him accusingly. Why does none of you answer your phone? Mine was on silent since I usually work around this time, and I don't think Atsumu has his with him at all. The tension hung heavy between them when suddenly Komori let his shoulders slump and with a sigh walked over to Osamu, simply letting his head fall against the tallest chest. A bit perplexed, it took a few seconds before Osamu pulled the libero into a hug. I was really worried when Kyo called, so distressed. I'm sorry. We should have told them right away when he arrived here. We just didn't know that he didn't tell them. Yeah. I have no idea what happened between them, but I'm worried. Suna hummed in silent agreement, his eyes straying to Atsumu once more. It was quiet until Komori's phone announced a new message. He begrudgingly separated from Osamu to take a look at it. Kyo asked if he should come to pick Atsumu up. Osamu shook his head slightly. Not yet. I think he needs the rest more than anything. One look at the sitter confirmed the statement, and Komori quickly typed a reply. Ultimately, all they were left to do with was wait. Osamu hated waiting. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a like and a comment. It would really help this channel and this series out as well. Now, there are a couple more parts to go. I'm super excited for the next one and to see your feedback on those. Especially, tell me what your favorite quote of this one was in the comment, under the pinned comment specifically. And I hope you're excited for the next parts. I certainly am. A special thanks goes out to my nerdy neckos. You support this channel so much. If you also want to become a nerdy necko, check out the join button under this video. Here are my other social media if you prefer to read fanfics. Check me out on Chatty. And of course there are also other videos in the end cut if you like them as videos. Now the next part is supposed to come out tomorrow. Have a wonderful and amazing day. See you then.
Get some food in you. Step 3. Think real hard about what you want to be. Step 4. Everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be